Welcome to Reawaken the Dream, a course for the writer mom or any time-pressed writer. Any of you who are forced to write in tiny fragments of time and are stuck feeling that you can't write because writing can't be a high priority for you in your life with your other responsibilities. I'm here to tell you that you can write. Just because you have higher priorities in your life doesn't mean that you have to take the bottom place. You deserve a place in your priorities, and even if it's only small fragments of time, you can write. And we are giving you in this course the tools you need. We're already on lesson 9. So if you just found us, scoot on back. There's a playlist. Start with lesson 1. They are sequential. So here we are in lesson 9. And we're ready to learn our 4th character trait already. Lesson 9, 4 times 9 is 36. There's 35 classes. We're a quarter of the way through already. Can you imagine that? We're a quarter of the way through to having 2 very practical tools. The one you've already learned and are continuing to learn on how to operate the note box, and the one we're working on building in this whole long second part of the course, the character profile, which will give you the power of living characters. So let's get started with a quick review of last week's class. Last week, we studied constancy. Constancy is a rather interesting word. It's not a word you use every day, which seems a bit ironic because constancy is the struggle of everyday life. It's the struggle to keep the commitments that you make to yourself. And the source in the animal world is a struggle for survival. It's part of survival because the animal has to know when it's time to give up. But we, as humans, want to know not give up at a time when it isn't time to give up. So we have this triad of emotions. The struggle is similar to the animal struggle to know when to quit. And corresponding to that, we have 3 victory states. One of the victory states has to do with when the commitment you made to yourself is a distant goal. It's wonderful, but it's far off. It's a great thing on the hill that you're trying to reach. Well, in that case, the way to achieve victory of constancy is to learn how to have joy in the journey, because that journey is too long to wait till the final goal to celebrate. A second type of promise that we can make to ourselves is the promise to create a good habit or break a bad habit. There, since it's something you want to do from now on, the question is, does it ever end? Is it struggle after struggle after struggle? And there we said that the victory there was taking it from the rudder trait, where you're conscious about it all the time, and moving it down to the anchor trait, where you don't have to think of it very much. And hopefully to a base trait where you don't really have to think about it at all. And that's the victory in creating a new habit or breaking a bad habit. But we said with victory, there was kind of a sad third victory state, a very sad one. And that is the acceptance. Because sometimes the right thing to do is to give up. And when the right thing to do is to give up, the victory state is acceptance. It's not the happiest, but it's the happiest that's available in the situation. Loss is very simple in constancy. Loss is just giving up too soon, giving up on yourself, and abandoning the things that you wanted to do. So that was our trait for last week, constancy. So we're ready for a new trait this week. Are you ready to see what our new trait is going to be? Our new trait is responsibility. Now, unlike constancy, you probably have a pretty good idea of what responsibility means, and it's very similar to constancy, except responsibility has to do with the commitments we make to others. Constancy, honoring ourselves, responsibility, honoring our promises to others. So as always, we're going to begin with a set of vignettes because, as we know, with all of these character traits, the thing that is true and real is this jumbled ball of emotions. And it's those emotions that have the power to wake up our writing, that have the power to move our reader and engage him in our writing. So it's that ball of emotions that's what's real. Then we'll break it down to an analysis where we try to dive into it and see what explains those. So we always begin with some stories. Our first story today has to do with a story that about a little boy, and it's one that his mother continues to tell this story, even though the boy's in his teens now, to his utter embarrassment. Well, he was 3 at the time. And it turns out that his mother was noticing that the little brother was kind of walking kind of funny, and his diaper was hanging kind of low, and he was starting to smell. So mom scoops up little brother, leaves to take care of him. The slightly older brother sees his chance. Mom's gone. Well, how he managed to get the heavy dining room chair drug into the kitchen has been lost to history. But he was quite capable of climbing up on the seat of that chair and reaching over the counter, struggling to reaching till his ribs hurt. He could just barely get his fingertips around the rim of the cookie jar and pull. Well, the jar tipped over and, being round, began to roll, and the lid of the jar rolled faster and punk, landed on the floor, and the knob fell off. And while the toddler was looking at the knob on the floor, he didn't notice that the jar was continuing to roll. And kaboom! Crash! The crash was deafening to the little boy's ears. He decided he better get down right away. So he got down onto the seat of the chair, and there he was dangling his toes down. He was going to get off that chair. Thank goodness Mom comes running in, and she scoops him up off that chair before his little bare toes could step on those shards of pottery that were everywhere. Well, it was quite the mess to clean up. And later on, when it was time to put him down for a nap, she was saying, Now, Matthew, you got into the cookie jar, didn't you?" And he whimpers and says, "No." Responsibility. Our next story came to me as being true. And I don't remember the details well enough to tell it like a real true story. So I think maybe we best think of it as though it was fiction. Too bad it didn't come to me in the now, because I keep a note box, but back then I didn't, so I don't really have all the details. But it's very roughly based on a true story. It seems that there was a teacher at a small school in a farming community, and she noticed that one of her students, a little girl, was bringing a potato for lunch every day. She started to worry about the little girl and asked around. Well, it turns out that the little girl's parents had a small farm, and that year all of their crops had failed except the potatoes. They had a bumper crop of potatoes, but everything else in the crops failed. Well, the teacher got to thinking. She called together the PTA and she said, "I have an idea. Why don't we start a school lunch program? We're a farming community. We can bring produce from our land. We can create lunches." And everyone loved the idea. And pretty soon, one parent after another was standing up saying what they could bring. And sure enough, the little girl's mother stood up proudly and said, "I can bring potatoes." Responsibility. Our third story. Well, Mandy did not mean for it to get out like that. She told Sheila to keep it a secret. And she only told Sheila about that secret Linda told her because Sheila was popular and she kind of wanted to be in with the popular group. So she told the secret on Linda, and now the whole class knew, and the whole class was laughing at Linda. Mandy felt horrible, and the teacher would be back any minute. What was she going to do? She got up her courage and she stood up and she said, "Stop it! Stop it right now!" And the whole class turned to her. Huh? Huh? And then she turned to Linda and said, "Linda, I'm sorry. I told your secret. It was very, very wrong of me, and I'm very sorry." The class went silent. One by one, the students closest to Linda turned to her and apologized for laughing. And pretty soon the whole class was nodding and saying, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Well, after the class was over, Mandy came up to Linda and said, "I'm so sorry, Linda. I'm really, really sorry." And Linda told her, "I forgive you. Let's still be friends." They went off arm in arm, and Mandy was thinking to herself, wow, having a true friend like Linda is worth far more than being in with Sheila and the in crowd. Responsibility. Our last story is one that you may have already heard. It's a story that's told quite often. You've probably heard it. But the strange thing is, I've never heard it told with the ending. It's always just cut off at a certain spot, and that's it, and they don't say any more. So I'll catch you up with the story, and then I'm going to tell you the ending because you deserve to know. Well, it seems long ago in a little village in France, the village had escaped a horrible calamity, and they decided that they would declare a great celebration in the village. Each of the villagers would prepare some fine food and bring it to the community area, and each of the villagers would bring a flask of wine from their own stores and pour it into a giant flask so that they could dispense the wine throughout the celebration to all who came. Well, one of the villagers thought to himself, "Oh, a whole flask of wine? Huh. If I just poured in water, no one would know the difference. In fact, there'd be so much wine, no one would even notice the difference." Glug, 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 glug. Well, came the celebration. The food was all ready. People were ready to sit down, and they went to dispense the wine. Out came nothing but water. And that's where they usually end the story. But I'm going to tell you what happened next. All of the villagers felt silent. The wives started staring at them. They were blushing and feeling very, very bad and looking around at one another. And one fellow piped up and said, "Well, I guess I'll pop off home and bring back a flask or two of wine." And so he did. And pretty soon all of the villagers were coming back to the gathering, each carrying 2 flasks of wine. And the wine was poured from the flasks, and all had a marvelous, marvelous celebration. Responsibility. Ah, but that still wasn't the end of the story. When the meal was done and everyone had eaten to their full, the wives sent the villagers back to that flask to carry a flask full of water down to the creek and dump it. You know what kind of a muddy mess it would have made if they just opened that spigot and let all the water out of that giant cask just flow down the middle of the dirt street? Do you know who would have been stuck cleaning up all the mud? Well, as it was, Their boots stayed outside of their homes that night. Responsibility. Okay. Now, responsibility is kind of a funny one because we're going to go into the analysis now, but we're going to put our thinking caps on to responsibility. And responsibility feels like such an intellectual concept. How could there even be an animal model for responsibility? Funny thing is, you get a twofer with responsibility. Responsibility has an animal model for victory and one for the struggle. You're only promised one for the struggle, but you want to know the one for victory? Our little friend the doggy can show up for the one for victory. Have you ever seen a dog who knows he's done something wrong? A dog who owns up to his bad behavior? Oh, you know how that looks. His head is down and his tail's between his legs. He's kind of looking up. Mommy, do you still love me? Yeah, that's one of the victory states of responsibility, owning up. Oh, and the other side of responsibility? Well, that's very simple. Not peeing in the corner of the dining room, even when mommy's late getting home. Well, limitations of bladder notwithstanding. So we got two victory states for responsibility from the dog. But let's get serious now. There is an animal struggle, and it's not so sweet. The animal struggle of responsibility is the dog guarding his food. His tail is not wagging and his teeth are showing. This is not a happy picture. The dog, it's a primal struggle. It's an animal instinct. The animal needs that food for survival. And if the animal instinct prevails, that dog is going to guard his food. That is the animal model of the struggle for responsibility. Well, you don't see too many humans growling to keep their food, but how many things do we have that we somehow think are essential for our survival? Wealth, status, honors, comfort, ease. Humans can think that we need all of these things. Status and honors, that really comes in with responsibility. If we're not willing to own up to what we've done, the consequences of what we've done, intended or not, will play right into these two factors. And as for following through with the thing that we said we'd do, to give the gift or to do the chore, well, those eat into comfort and ease. And yes, they do. For humans, we can tend to feel that those are our very survival. So that's the struggle. And what about the victory and the loss states? The interesting thing about the victory and the loss is they're completely compatible one to the other. You notice how interesting and how the triad of emotions is a little bit different for each of these character traits? Well, this one is really, really direct. That do what I said I would do what I ought to do. If I do it, it's victory. If I don't do it, it's loss. Owning up, taking the consequences, whether they're intended or not. If I do it, it's victory. If I don't, it's loss. And so this is actually one of the most simple pictures that we've had to date for a triad of emotions. And I think it also reflects the fact that we kind of understand responsibility pretty well. So let's take a look at the group that responsibility belongs to. Responsibility belongs to a group called the empathy group. And what the empathy group has in common is it all relates to our relationship with others. All of them. And this is going to actually turn out to be by far the biggest group. And with that empathy group under our belt, we have now seen all four of the groups of character traits. Remember when we introduced character traits, we said that even though they fall into groups, they only have power at the individual level. At the group level, it's like trying to play the piano wearing oven mitts. You can't get much of a tune going. But the 4 groups will help us organize and understand and even remember the character traits. So let's review basically the groups that we've got. In the balance group, we have orderliness. And remember, the balance groups are the ones that you could have too much or too little. There's the outcome, the lost states are on 2 sides of the question. The resilience group, we have constancy. And that has to do with the courage, whatever it takes to drive our way through this. The insight group, we have circumspection, which is looking around and understanding all of the factors going into the situation. And now here for the empathy group, we have responsibility. So these are the groups that we're going to see play out again and again. So we now get to go to a very, very interesting part of the lesson. And this, we're ready with 4 traits and 1 from each group. We're ready to start putting the character traits together to create a character. We're going to use a process called psychoassembly. And if you've never heard of that word before, okay, I'll admit I just made it up. But it means what it says. We are going to assemble our characters out of the character traits. And we're going to do a couple of examples in this lesson to see how that works, how it functions, why it works, and why it's valuable. Right in this lesson. Okay, how does psychoassembly compare to psychoanalysis? Psychoanalysis takes years and years of training, PhD, tons of clinical experience. It's a hard job because you're trying to take a suffering human being, a real live suffering human being, and figure out what's going on in that person, and then which piece needs help, which piece do they need to have support in, where do they need to be shown what the problem is, aided in solving the problem. It's kind of like trying to take a math problem where you've said, okay, 177,571, what 3 numbers do you multiply together to get this number? What 3 prime numbers, when multiplied together, will give you that number? X times Y times Z. It's a hard problem. Even if I gave you a calculator, hey, you can use your calculator. It'd get a little bit easier. What if I gave you a list of prime numbers? It'll get easier still, but it's still a hard problem because you have to figure it out, factor it out. And in fact, this is really, it's not just an analogy. This is kind of a lot like what happens when you actually try to do scientific analysis on character traits. You have to tease them out through a process called multivariate regression, multivariate analysis. So it's not that uncommon a problem. And in fact, the things that you tease out are even called factors. Our psychoassembly, we're in this privileged role where we are fiction writers. That means we get to invent our characters. So we can give them these character traits anywhere, in any position on the diagram that we want to give them, wherever it suits us in our story. And that means that our problem is like saying, what do you get when you multiply 41 times 61 times 71? And yes, you can use your calculator. That one's easy. And we even see the answer. So that's why we don't have to have a massive amount of education to be able to do this. We are actually more like the animal trainers that our dogs keep showing up. We're more like dog trainers. We're teaching ourselves how to put names on certain feelings, and then we're assigning them to the characters that we built. Far, far easier. So now, as we get to using these things, I'm stepping on this. Remember, this is a slide from early on, from your introductory lesson to the character traits. And we were talking about how brainstorming works. And we said that when brainstorming works, ideas bounce off one another and they multiply and they grow. Whereas if we're all by ourselves and we try to capture an idea and write it down and get all the nuances out of it, as soon as we try to pin down an idea, it pops. And what we found out was that if we had a fresh idea that related to the idea that had popped, all of a sudden we just barely touch it to those fragments and the idea comes back to life. And I told you at that time that that was the basis for this concept that I keep using, this power of living characters. And now we're far enough along in the process that you can actually experience this, witness this, see it happening, and see how you can make it work for you. It's only going to grow. We've got 4 traits. We're going to have 28. But we have enough already to give you an idea of how this is going to work. By now, you're used to our character profile diagram. I've gotten rid of all the text because you know what the positions mean. You know that the traits along this line, we call the rudder traits. They're in the conscious awareness area, and that's the struggles that your character is very well aware of. The traits down here, the blue lines, we call them the anchor traits. By and large, the character's got that struggle under control and doesn't have to think too much about it. All the way down here at the base trait, locked in. Just, that's the character's middle name, is the solidity with that one. Then we came up above the line, the green ones, we called those the wing traits. And we said, generally, these are not accessible to the conscious struggle of the character. The character is generally going to fail and only just be vaguely aware that they ought to be struggling with that. And then we had this last one, which we called the pinnacle trait. It's the trait that is just totally out of the conscious awareness of our character, and it's just basically inaccessible to the character at this point in time. Now, the reason why pinnacle traits even come into play, we said, is when we have the great journey of the character, the hero's journey. What we found was that he'd first be struggling with these traits, show some mastery on it, show him, then these guys become accessible, and we show him struggling with the wing traits and getting those down, and then finally the pinnacle trait becomes successful, and with a massive struggle, ta-da, victory in the pinnacle trait. And now you've got the marvelous explosive point of greatest excitement in the story. Ba-ba! So those are the positions. And now we're going to play with some traits that we have. We're going to just stick with the, okay, here we are. We have our 4 character traits now. So let's play with a little bit of a scenario and how you can use these to build them up. And this is why this one is coming out of a novel that I'm actually writing. Yes, I'm writing in scattered fragments of time, just like you. And in the novel that I'm writing, I'm introducing a minor character. Her name is Sarah. And Sarah is new to a group of women who gather to quilt. And the interesting thing about these women is one of the women is the major character in that group of 4 women. Her husband is a key character in the story. So what I'm doing with Sarah in the scene, I'm going to give you a tiny snippet out of that scene. What I'm doing with Sarah is I'm letting Sarah show my reader, not tell the reader, show the reader that Edwin's a little bit of a character to watch out for. So it's going to both warn the readers about Edwin and build curiosity about Edwin. So in my case, Sarah, being new to the group and not knowing many people in the group or what's really going on, the dynamics of the group, I've given her circumspection in the wing position. And In this position, the scene, tiny little fragment of the scene, we see Sarah saying, oh, if it's only for a few days, they'll be okay. And then we see the other two women look at her with their mouths open, but they don't say anything. Clearly, Sarah doesn't know Edwin. That's it for the fragment. So I've used her because she's basically a blank slate. I've given her weakness on circumspection so that I can use her to curiosity establish Edwin as he's going to be a problematic guy. Now that I did that, I need to track that on her character profile. I need to fill out a card for Sarah that shows that she has circumspection in this position. Because later on in the story, I can't put anything else in that position. If I do, it's going to feel off to my readers, and she will immediately turn into a cardboard character. But having let my readers see that she's weak on circumspection, if I put her into another situation where circumspection is needed, my readers are going to feel nervous and they won't even know why. They'll have this low level of nervousness because somewhere in the back of mind, they know that they saw she's weak in that. And in fact, I'm going to use that at a spot. There's going to be another spot in the program, in the book, where I show her having orderliness as an anchor trait. And the way this is going to happen is the group is on a road trip and they're going to say, oh no, we've got to go all the way back. And it's going to turn out that Sarah, due to her strength and orderliness, has what they need and they don't need to make a backtrack. So she gets to be a little bit of a hero there. And then at a more critical spot in the story, there's a situation where Sarah needs circumspection. We know she's weak in circumspection. We know she's strong in orderliness. And we set up a situation where she should be able to notice that something is out of order in the picture and cause that to trigger her to make her reach for circumspection and achieve it and save the group having a problem. So that's how these traits get used. But they get used in another purpose as well. I'm going to take you back into one of our scenarios for that one because we've already established a little bit of an emotional connection, which we don't share with Sarah. I'm talking about our toddler. Think about how I set up the scene with our toddler. I had him talked about the dining room chair that we don't know how it got into the kitchen. Well, that's a motion. The chair is moving from the dining room to the kitchen. It's almost challenging the listener to imagine that chair being pulled. You can almost hear it going across the floor with a little toddler dragging it. But it also shows that he does not, absolutely does not have any circumspection, because that's a dumb thing to have dragged the chair, and it's an even dumber thing to climb up on it. I suppose we could say that he has circumspection as a wing trait. Maybe as a teenager he might have it as a wing trait. He's a 3-year-old. It's a pinnacle trait. Notice what happened there. When you create the profile diagram for the toddler, the moment of installing circumspection in that spot should be married to the sound of that chair being pulled across the kitchen floor. That moment to go back to the story, feel the circumspection in the story, that is where that balloon bubble comes from. That, even if it disappears, which it will, as soon as you walk away and you have to go do something else and you come back, the circumspection is just little fragments of the balloon. But then you think about the story and you almost hear that chair moving and it pops back alive. But he doesn't even just have one character trait. He's got another one, doesn't he? Is Matthew, you got into the cookie jar. No. Well, obviously, responsibility is a wing trait for our little guy. And so when we put the responsibility onto the character profile diagram, we immediately think of no. And we marry that emotion with the trait on the diagram. And it goes onto one of your 4x6 cards. It'll fit easily on a 4x6 card. It'll have the toddler and these two traits. Those traits are going to be frozen in time. And if later on you develop your story, always honor those traits being in that position. And if not, you have to say why they moved. So that is the mechanism behind how you get the power of living characters. Remember with the main cards, I told you when you create your main cards, never, ever, ever put a main card in your box that doesn't have a piece of you. If it doesn't have your thought, your wonder, your feelings at the moment, something from you written onto that card, your box is not going to have the magic when you come back to it again. And it's the exact same thing with these guys. If when you install the trait, install in your mind the story. And if it isn't going to be installed easily in your mind, card 2 of 2 would work nicely. Circumspection, dining room chair, responsibility. No, he whimpered. That is how you get the power of living characters. And if you can imagine, as we start filling in this circle with our main characters, and you stop and visit these things, very, very soon you are practically dealing with practically a living being in your mind. And not only that, there's 2 more things that come out of that. One is you've got the chart, so you've got the consistency, so you don't blow it with your reader. The reader sees the same character across the whole timeline, even though you had to write in fragments. And the reader senses the same emotions that you sense, and you become alive and energized with them. So you're both becoming alive and energized by the same set of emotions. You just cannot beat this for power. And given that your minor characters can be custom created for establishing the traits of your main characters, you have all the power you need to make a spectacular story. So that is our lesson for today, and all that remains is to tell you about your homework assignment. But I also have another pair of announcements. This is an interview week, and you have this week an interview with Haley Renee. And Haley is a member of our group, a very interesting young woman. She's pursuing her 2nd bachelor's degree and traveling over the world to do it. She has a website where she shares some of her insights, and I know you're going to enjoy very much meeting Haley. And another announcement, we're going to have our own private Facebook group. The group is called Writing in the Chaos. If you're on my email list or you sign up today for my email list, you will get an invitation to join that Facebook group. The invitations are going to go out on Wednesday. So just 2 days from now, if you're up from it, you may have already gotten it if you're watching this at some time in the future. The Facebook group it's closed and it's private, so it's very, very safe. And it even allows for anonymous posting, which we wouldn't normally want to do. But not only is every member pre-vetted, but every post is pre-vetted. And that means that you're not going to see spamming. You're not going to see ugly blasts. It's a safe place. It's a safe place for you to post what you came up with your homework assignment. You can post questions. You can get discussions going with other people who are among us in our group to realize that there's a power here and help you to connect with that power and help you feel motivated to do the work that it takes. I often say that there's no charge for the course, and there isn't, and there's no charge for the Facebook group, but there is a cost. The cost is the effort you have to put in, and there's no way to get around that. So if you have a group that encourages you, I'm going to try to post there every day with even just a little couple of lines to keep you motivated and excited and encouraged. I'm not going to write essays, just a few words so you know I'm thinking about you, you're in my mind, you're in my heart. So, to give you something to start with, our homework assignment for this week. All right, let's see. What do we have for homework? Oh, yes. We're going to just practice with the responsibility in a very direct way. Uh, the first one, you're going to give your character a task that they need to do as out of responsibility to another. You're going to let them succeed, and then you're going to show what are the consequences of his success, and he or she, and then how does that make the character feel? Then the second one, we're going to reverse it, and we're going to let him fail at that task. And how does that change the consequences? How does that change the feelings? Then we're going to look at the other side, which is owning up. And this time, because we like to end on success, this time we'll take the failure side first. Give a character a situation in which they fail to own up, and how does that turn out for the character? And then switch it around and create a situation where the character does own up, and how does that work out? And you'd be very, very welcome to post those on the Facebook group. I will include it in the instructions, but one of the things I'm going to ask that you do is do #9 or 09 to let people who are reading this, who may be behind you and they're only getting their first character trait, they'll look at that and say, oh, 9, I don't want to go over there yet. And they can skip over it. Whereas you can spot also other people who are writing about lesson 9 and say, oh, I want to see what they did. So I do hope you will start gathering in the Facebook group, and hope to see you over there, and hope to see you next week for lesson 10. And in the meantime, I'm Kathleen Spracklin, caregiver to the writer mom and to every time-pressed writer. Bye-bye.